The following video is only an opinion. The following review is strictly the opinion of myself. It is always wise to consult multiple sources when considering the purchase of a product. Okay, so today I'm essentially going to be doing a review of the Kaplan Advatage class. I've chosen to remain anonymous simply because I don't want to release my name out there. But nonetheless, I'll start. Basic overview of the Kaplan Advatage is that I'm going to go over the higher score guarantee of the Kaplan Advantage program. I'm going to talk about stuff I've read about the teachers because I actually used their online program, which essentially was a go-at-your-own-pace program, and my teachers were sort of pre-recorded. I wasn't able to interact with that particular teacher, so I'm going to be using other examples to describe how other people have rated teachers from this program. I'm going to talk about organization of materials. I'm going to talk about mapping. I'm not going to go into detail of what it is. I'm essentially going to give some pros and cons of it and what my opinion of it was. I'm going to talk about the star rating system that are used by the Kaplan textbooks, or the review notes, essentially, which are pretty much built like large textbooks. And I'll talk about the textbooks individually, physics, general chemistry, verbal, organic chemistry, and biology. So the higher score guarantee, as you can see in this first bullet point, I've got all in all, this guarantee gives students a false sense of security. And the reason I'm putting that is that it's very difficult to actually meet the requirements needed for this higher score guarantee, which essentially means if you don't score better on the MCAT than you did before taking their course, you'll get your money back. The only problem is, without an MCAT score, Kaplan, they use your baseline or the first score you ever received for an MCAT. They use their diagnostic test as a baseline score. And the problem with this diagnostic test is it's much more difficult than the actual MCAT exam. And it's pretty much, I went online, I looked at a bunch of forums, and it was practically unanimous that the Kaplan diagnostic test was more difficult than the actual MCAT. And so just put it this way, you're going to take, first thing you're going to do if you take this course is you're going to take the Kaplan diagnostic test. I'm pretty much going to assume that you haven't studied that much for the actual MCAT yet, which is why you're going to be considering purchasing this course. And just think, you haven't studied for it. The test is supposed to be harder than the actual MCAT, so you're going to score low. And think, you're going to go through the course, you're going to take the materials, you're actually going to study. Of course, you would expect yourself to score higher. And not only will you'll likely score higher on the actual MCAT, to qualify for the higher score guarantee, there's a large amount of quizzes and classes that you're required to take to qualify for the higher score guarantee, and it's very long, and they're very strict on what you have to meet, or how many you can miss. I think it's only about 2 actual lectures, and you have to make them up. I'm just saying, essentially, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops to get it, and it's very unlikely that you'll actually score lower on the MCAT than you did on the Kaplan diagnostic. The teachers, like I said, I had the online program. I listened to pre-recorded lectures, but just based on information found on internet forums, the teachers you receive from this course are either going to be hit or miss. You're probably going to get a good one, or you're going to get a bad one. And that's mainly the gist of what I found when I researched this. I used the online version, as I said, and in my opinion, the teachers were kind of boring, but I probably had an unfair expectation considering it is an MCAT review class. Of course it's going to be boring. So organization of materials, when you get the Kaplan class, you'll get a bunch of access to so many materials I can't even list them all. It would take far too long. on Kaplan's website. You'll get a username, ID, password, etc. You'll log in and you'll have access to tons and tons of stuff like 10 AAMCs, all these Kaplan practice MCAT exams, extra quizzes, extra notes. And honestly, it just has so much, and it's just kind of thrown all at you, and it's like, okay, here it is. Here's a ton of stuff, and you have trouble. Essentially, it was hard for me to rummage through it all and actually find what I actually needed or what I actually could use to improve my score, because there honestly was so much that unless you spent 24/7 doing just this Kaplan stuff, you wouldn't be able to get through it all. Mapping. Mapping essentially is a strategy where it involves writing short reviews of the main points of paragraphs in the physical science section, biological science section, and the verbal reasoning. This is the main strategy used by Kaplan, and in my opinion, it's not that great for the main reasons. The science passages on the physical science and biological sciences, they're short. It's really easy to recall the location of information. It doesn't require a map, and that's what mapping does. The short reviews you'll essentially use to go back into the passage and find information. And they're so small that you'll be able to find it easily. I mean, if you're taking the MCAT, you've had to have at least done well on, some advanced science courses that weed out a bunch of kids. So, I mean, if you're up into this point, you're going to be able to recall the location of information relatively easily with practice. And on the verbal section, mapping essentially just disrupts your flow, or just your flow on reading and interpreting the main idea of the passage. And the main idea of passage is actually probably the most important thing to understand on the verbal reasoning section, because a lot of questions stem from understanding that. The star rating system that Kaplan uses, essentially if you get the Kaplan review books, each little section of information like genetics work is rated on this 6-star system. 6 stars being Kaplan wants you to really focus on that, or you would think it would want you to do that. Actually, I'm sorry, Kaplan actually considers learnability, difficulty, and the likelihood of occurrence on the MCAT when giving this rating system. So essentially, when it gives you 5 out of 6 stars, you don't know if it's 5 out of 6 stars because it occurs a lot on the MCAT. Is it 5 out of 6 because it's really easy? Is it 5 out of 6 because it's really easy to learn? I was always confused by that definition, and essentially, you really need to just be concerned with the likelihood of occurrence and nothing else. If you want to score well in the MCAT, you need to be prepared as much as you possibly can. And no topic on the MCAT is impossible to learn. A lot of times I found on the biological science section, with me being a biology major, that sometimes I would know too much information when it came to answering questions on passages, because I would kind of lose track of information that was on the passage and then information that I knew from my more advanced science classes. But like on physics, I didn't really have that problem because I just had your basic physics classes, the algebra-based physics class. But overall, like I said, star rating system is very confusing. Physics, I'm going to cover kind of how Kaplan goes over physics. It does a good job of covering theoretical knowledge. On the other hand, Kaplan focuses too much on math. And all their practice questions they give you, they have high yield questions, which they say are like questions that are or topics that are frequently to occur on the MCAT. And if you look at the high yield section, it's literally just a bunch of math. And if you actually had to do that much math on a question based on what Kaplan will kind of teach you, is you should skip it, because you're going to waste a bunch of time just getting 1 point. And Kaplan mentions that the MCAT is not a math test, but they treat it like a math test in their physics review. They really have you spend too much time turning yourself into a little human calculator rather than learning theoretical knowledge. So overall, I'd give the physics a really bad review. General chemistry, it covers theoretical knowledge needed for the MCAT to a decent degree, like the physics section. The mathematical focus is a lot less compared to that of the physics review. So overall, I would say the chemistry review is actually decent and worth your time, unlike the physics section. Verbal reasoning, in my opinion, mapping is worthless. Of course, that is my opinion. Mapping, essentially, like I said earlier, it disrupts your flow. It prevents you from determining the main idea of the passage, which is really the most important thing you should focus on. And many questions pertain to understanding the main idea of the passage. So I realize I just said that, just rereading that last point, because that's probably the most important thing you need to realize. And another thing, Kaplan, for the verbal reasoning, they suggest pairing passages together based on difficulty. I'm not going to go into that because, of course, that's their intellectual property. I'm not going to give away all their strategies. And essentially, they give you an organized timeline on how well you should, or how long you should spend on your passages that you've paired together. And if you want to score well, you need to do well on all the passages. So, spending a bunch of time going back and forth, going, maybe this is a hard passage and maybe this is an easy passage. What should I do? Should I pair them together, or should I pair a hard one and a hard passage together? That's really just a waste of time. All in all, you got to do well on every single passage to do well on the verbal section. Unless you're just going to get a perfect score on all the passages and then miss all the questions on one of them, which is highly unlikely, you're going to have to do well on all of them. So essentially, Kaplan's strategy, just waste your time, focus on the main idea of the passage, and just do the passages in order, unlike what Kaplan tells you to do. Organic chemistry, just throw the organic chemistry book out the window. Literally, just throw it out your window. It's worthless. Kaplan appears to rewrite an organic chemistry textbook in an MCAT review format. The only problem is the organic chemistry on the MCAT is nothing like the organic chemistry you endured in school. So in all, Kaplan's organic chemistry review, you focus on a bunch of stuff that's not even going to be on the test. And that alone would almost make me not want to take this course again if I could somehow go back in time and tell myself whether or not I should take the Kaplan Advantage. So organic chemistry, in general, it's bad. Biology, didn't really find anything wrong with the biology review. Like the chemistry review, the biology review book was worth my time. Would I recommend Kaplan? Well, if you look at how I reviewed it, I only gave chemistry and biology a decent review. I told you to throw one book out the window, and everything else received a bad review. So my answer's got to be no. I would not recommend Kaplan Advantage program at all, whatsoever.